The forgotten origin of the succubus legend. There are stories so ancient, we no longer know whether they came from dreams, nightmares, or something even deeper. The legend of the succubus is one of them. It wasn't born in modern books or films, but in the whispers of the first civilizations. In the darkness between wakefulness and sleep. Long before she was called Succubus, this entity was feared in the cultures of Mesopotamia, Sumer, and Babylon. The Sumerians called her Lilichu, a nocturnal female spirit, seductive and destructive. Later, she would give rise to the figure of Lilith, considered in some traditions to be Adam's first wife, who refused to submit and was banished. Over time, this figure fragmented into hundreds of versions. In Jewish, Christian, Arab, and European folklore, she always returned with the same essence: an ethereal, irresistible woman who visits men at night to seduce them and drain their life force. The term succubus comes from the Latin succubere, meaning to lie beneath. And behind this name lie centuries of collective fear. Fear of sex, fear of women, fear of desire itself. But were these figures merely metaphors? Or could they have been real manifestations, entities that feed on a very specific type of human energy? The origin of the succubus is a mirror, and what it reflects depends on how deeply you dare to look. What are succubi and incubi? Entities or archetypes? The invisible world is inhabited by forms that do not obey the laws of matter. They have no bodies, yet they have will. They don't speak, yet they influence us. And among these entities, few inspire as much fascination and fear as succubi and incubi. The distinction is simple. The succubus is a feminine entity that seduces men. The incubus is its masculine counterpart, seducing women. Both, however, share a common trait. They feed on human sexual energy. But what exactly are these figures? Are they real spiritual beings from another dimension, who access our dreams and desires to feed on the most vital part of us? Or are they archetypes of the collective unconscious, symbolic representations of our repressed drives, fears, and sexual obsessions? Perhaps they are both. Like everything in the subtle world, the succubus seems to dwell in the space between the psychological and the spiritual. Carl Jung spoke of archetypes as primordial images that emerge from the unconscious, and the succubus is undoubtedly one of them. The figure of the seductress, of temptation, of forbidden pleasure, that attracts us, but also destroys us if we fail to understand her. But what about the people across centuries who have reported real encounters with such entities? Touches during sleep, whispered voices in the dark, intense physical sensations, and even sudden drops in energy, health, or sexual vitality. What about esoteric traditions that warn against thought forms that gain autonomy and, fed by human desire, become astral parasites? In the end, perhaps the succubus is less a being and more a spiritual phenomenon born from unconscious desire, a shadow that takes form whenever we ignore the sacredness within pleasure. Because, like every deep symbol, the succubus is not just an enemy. She is also a messenger, and what she reveals is what desire becomes when it loses its soul. The role of desire in spiritual manipulation. Desire is one of the most powerful forces in existence. It moves life itself. It drives us to create, to seek, to transform the world around us. But when misunderstood, it can also imprison us. In the spiritual realm, desire is seen as a double-edged sword. It can open the door to expansion, or become a chain of enslavement. The succubus, whether symbolic or spiritual, represents exactly this tipping point, the moment when desire stops being a vital energy and becomes a tool of manipulation. Entities that feed on human libido don't need to force themselves upon us. They seduce. They whisper promises. They create hyper-realistic dreams. They invoke memories of pleasure, and then harvest the energy you give without realizing it. This kind of manipulation is subtle, because it doesn't look like a threat. It wears the mask of excitement, freedom, fantasy. But behind the allure, there's always an invisible exchange. You receive sensations, and in return, you give away your most creative, potent, and sacred energy. Ancient cultures understood this. That's why sexual energy was protected, directed, sacralized. Because they knew, where desire is wasted, shadows grow. And in today's world, where pleasure has become a product, where desire is exploited by algorithms, and we are taught to satisfy impulses without understanding their source, the ground is more fertile than ever for thought forms that feed off this energetic confusion. But the truth is simple. No one can be manipulated by what they've already recognized within themselves. Desire, when conscious, is no longer a battlefield. It becomes a key to the sacred. Historical accounts of night visits and erotic possessions. Human history is filled with curious, and at times disturbing, records of nighttime encounters with entities that take advantage of our vulnerability during sleep. Accounts that span continents, cultures, and centuries. And all of them describe, with eerily similar details, an invisible presence that invades dreams and feeds on the sleeping body. In the Middle Ages, these manifestations were feared and widely documented. Men would wake up exhausted, terrified, claiming that a woman had mounted them during the night, seducing them and draining their strength. Women, in turn, reported intense dreams involving dominant male figures who possessed them against their will. These entities were given names, Succubi and Incubi. They were taken seriously enough that many monasteries created specific prayers and rituals for protection during sleep. This wasn't mere superstition. It was treated as a real spiritual problem. The phenomenon persisted through the centuries. In the Victorian era, doctors and clergy tried to explain these night visits as hysteria, sleep paralysis, or simple delusion. But the symptoms described, pressure on the chest, involuntary arousal, loss of energy, and lingering obsession, pointed to something more subtle, an energetic invasion disguised as a dream. Even today, people around the world report similar experiences, presences that appear at the threshold between sleep and wakefulness, with clear erotic intentions, leaving behind physical and emotional imbalance. Many describe these encounters as addictive, even if terrifying. Others speak of spiritual obsession, as if a part of their soul had been marked by the encounter. In Spiritist tradition, these entities are known as astral obsessors. In esotericism, as energetic parasites. In depth psychology, as repressed sexual shadow. What all these perspectives share is the idea that the invisible world is not neutral. It responds to, and often feeds on, what you hide within yourself. The succubus, in this sense, doesn't invade your life. It's drawn to something vibrating in your energetic field, and the more unconscious your desire is, the more easily it can be exploited. Succubi in the Middle Ages, sex, sin, and the fear of women. To understand the figure of the succubus, we must look at the cultural context that shaped her, and few periods were as fertile for this as the Middle Ages. At that time, the Church held near total control over morality, the body, and the collective imagination. Sexuality was seen as a human weakness, a dangerous terrain where the devil could easily act, and women were often portrayed as the gateway to damnation. The succubus, then, was born and strengthened in this scenario as an embodiment of female sexual sin, a woman who not only feels desire, but arouses it in others, and must therefore be feared. It is no coincidence that reports of succubi surged in the same centuries when women began to be persecuted as witches. The connection is clear. Women who rejected submissive roles, who possessed knowledge of the body, nature, or spirituality, were associated with lust, seduction, and evil. The succubus is, in this sense, a projection of male fear toward the untamable feminine. But there's something deeper still. By turning sexual desire into something demonic, medieval culture created a split between body and spirit, and the succubus, as the ultimate symbol of that division, emerged as a warning. All pleasure comes with a price. Thus, sexual energy was tied to guilt, and guilt became a powerful tool for social and spiritual control. Behind the figure of the succubus, then, we see a distorted reflection of female sexuality. Rather than being acknowledged as a sacred, creative force, it was transformed into a threat, a shadow, and what is repressed always returns, darker, more seductive, more dangerous. Today, by revisiting these legends, we're not just exploring ancient myths. We're looking at how desire has been manipulated throughout history, and how we still carry these scars in our collective unconscious. Between myth and psyche, succubi as reflections of the unconscious, not every demon comes from outside. Often, what we call external entities are symbolic manifestations of the forces dwelling in our own unconscious. In this sense, the succubus can be understood not just as a mystical creature, but as a deep archetype, a psychic shadow that takes form when certain parts of the soul are repressed. Carl Jung, in his study of the collective unconscious, noted that everything we don't integrate into consciousness, desires, traumas, impulses, doesn't disappear. It hides, and the more we deny it, the stronger it becomes, until it resurfaces, wearing a symbolic mask. The succubus, then, represents that seductive and dangerous feminine force which, when rejected or misunderstood, returns as temptation, addiction, or obsession. It is sexual energy distorted, turned into an enemy. Desire that wasn't welcomed, but demonized. And for that reason, it takes control of us. This archetype shows up in dreams, fantasies, uncontrollable impulses. It manifests more intensely in those disconnected from their own body, who feel guilt around pleasure, or who have a fragmented relationship with sexuality. In this context, the succubus is not just an entity that attacks. It is a mirror, revealing what you've yet to recognize in yourself. To face it is not merely a matter of spiritual protection. It is a journey of deep self-knowledge, because the more you know your shadows, the less power they hold over you. What happens energetically during dream encounters? Dreams are not just random creations of the mind. They are portals, liminal spaces between worlds, between the conscious and unconscious, between the physical and the astral. During sleep, consciousness shifts. The body rests, but the energetic field expands, and the soul can access other planes of existence, some elevated, others not so much. It is within this setting that many succubus encounters occur. Lucid dreams filled with eroticism, vivid sensations, presences that feel too real to be just dreams. But what actually happens in those moments? Energetically, the astral body, our subtle counterpart, connects to specific vibrational frequencies. When a person's field is saturated with uncontrolled desire, emotional need, guilt, or obsessive thoughts, it becomes highly attractive to entities that feed on that energy. These entities don't need explicit permission. They connect through vibrational resonance, and the dream becomes the perfect stage for contact. What seems pleasurable in the moment may actually be opening a channel of energy drainage. Extreme pleasure is often followed by apathy, fatigue upon waking, a sense of having given something away, or even memory gaps. On a subtle level, it's as if part of your vital force was exchanged for an illusory experience of pleasure. And the most dangerous part? The more you crave to repeat the experience, the stronger the bond with that presence becomes. That's why discernment is essential. Not every sexual dream is a sign of spiritual connection or personal liberation. Many are simply energetic bait. To break free of this trap, you must raise your vibration and reconnect desire with consciousness. Energetic vampirism. Entities that feed on pleasure. Not all vampires drink blood. Some feed on something far more subtle and far more precious, your vital energy. Energetic vampirism is a phenomenon studied across various esoteric, occult, and spiritual traditions. It occurs when an entity, incarnate or discarnate, connects to your auric field to absorb emotional, mental, or sexual energy, usually without your awareness. In the case of succubi, the main food source is pleasure without consciousness. The energy generated by thoughts, fantasies, and uncontrolled sexual acts creates a dense, powerful vibration, easily absorbed by entities from the lower astral plane. These beings don't have physical bodies, but they feel. And to keep feeling, they need a vibrational host, someone who generates what they crave. As astral parasites, they stimulate fantasies, trigger impulses, and even interfere in dreams or thoughts, all to keep their source active. That's why many people report feeling drained, unmotivated, or emotionally unstable after compulsively consuming pornography or having repetitive erotic dreams. There is an exchange happening, but only one side is gaining. This kind of vampirism is rarely violent or frightening. In fact, it's seductive, because the pleasure offered is real, but the cost is invisible, and that's where the danger lies. The more someone gives in to this kind of unconscious pleasure, the weaker their vibrational field becomes. And the weaker it is, the more vulnerable they are to further parasitic connections. It's a cycle, and like any cycle, it can only be broken with awareness, willpower, and the transmutation of sexual energy into something higher. The key is to realize desire itself isn't the problem. The problem is when it becomes food for something you can't see. The astral body and its vulnerability to uncontrolled desire. You are not just flesh and bone. Beyond the physical body lies the astral body, a subtle layer of your being that carries your emotions, desires, fears, and intentions. It is with this body that you dream. It is the part that projects into non-physical realms while you sleep, and it is also the one that vibrates when you feel desire, even if your physical body remains still. Now imagine what happens when that body is overtaken by uncontrolled pleasure. It becomes a kind of energetic beacon, radiating signals and frequencies that astral entities can pick up instantly. It's like sending out an unconscious call saying, "I'm open, vulnerable, and willing to accept any experience that gives me immediate pleasure." And that attracts. It draws in presences that connect to your field and exploit what you don't yet master, your sexual energy disconnected from consciousness. Unlike the physical body, the astral body has no material barriers. It expands, projects, and connects. And for that reason, it's even more sensitive to subtle intentions, yours and others. If you go to sleep after consuming intense erotic content, for example, your astral body might still be vibrating on that frequency, opening doors for encounters that are anything but random. Likewise, repressed emotions, unresolved traumas, or hidden obsessions leave cracks in the astral body's structure. And it's through those cracks that entities enter. Uncontrolled desire is not just an impulse. It is an energetic breach. When the astral body is out of balance, a person begins living in a distorted reality. They confuse pleasure with love, surrender with addiction, and spiritual presence with dream-based illusion. Protecting the astral body doesn't mean repressing desire. It means integrating it, becoming the master of your own energy, rather than a slave to the impulses that open dangerous doors. Pleasure, guilt, and obsession. The spiritual trap of the succubus, what begins with pleasure, often ends in prison. The succubus's trap is not built on sensuality alone. It is woven from the invisible threads of guilt, obsession, and emotional dependency. These entities don't simply provide pleasurable experiences. They create a cycle, an energetic loop where pleasure is followed by emptiness. Emptiness by guilt, and guilt by more desire. This mechanism has been known for centuries in spiritual traditions that warn, sensual addiction binds more tightly than physical chains. When someone has contact with a succubus, The excitement they feel goes beyond the ordinary, something that transcends the limits of physical reality. It feels like a forbidden ecstasy. But upon waking, there is a heaviness, an inexplicable exhaustion, a sense of being invaded, and sometimes a deep, unjustifiable melancholy. Over time, this pattern repeats, creating unconscious obsession. The person starts to chase that kind of pleasure in other sources. Pornography, increasingly extreme fantasies, empty experiences, and nothing seems to satisfy. That's when the succubus grows stronger, because it doesn't just want to provoke desire. It wants you to become addicted to the emptiness that comes afterward. And the more you try to fill that emptiness with more pleasure, the more trapped you become. Guilt, often rooted in religious or moral beliefs, doesn't free you. On the contrary, it deepens the cycle. Because where there is shame, there is repression. And what is repressed returns with force. The secret of the succubus's spiritual trap lies in this trio: pleasure without awareness, guilt without redemption, and desire without direction. Breaking free takes more than discipline. It requires energetic reintegration. Pleasure must be transformed into a bridge, not a prison. Desire must be seen as the soul's language, not a weakness. Because true exorcism doesn't happen with screams. It happens with light, lucid dreams, or astral invasions. The line is thin, night falls, the body rests, and consciousness is set free. In the silence of sleep, the rational mind dissolves and the unconscious speaks. This is the realm where lucid dreams emerge, experiences in which you know you are dreaming and may even control the events. It feels like freedom, and it can be, but not always. There's a little discussed detail. Not every lucid dream is a product of your mind. Some are real interfaces with other planes, portals to experiences beyond imagination. And this is where the danger lies. The same lucidity that lets you fly or walk through walls in dreams can also lead you into encounters with external presences, ones that exploit your curiosity and vulnerability. Many people report intense dream experiences, especially sexual ones, involving charming, seductive, almost irresistible figures. And they assume it was just a good dream. But what if it wasn't? What if that figure was a clever consciousness, a being that knows exactly how to induce pleasure to extract energy? The difference between a true lucid dream and a disguised astral invasion is subtle, but real. In the first, you are in control. In the second, you think you are, but are being guided by impulses that are not your own. Succubi and other lower plane entities often manifest at this threshold. They take advantage of vibrational openings and ignorance of the subtle worlds to infiltrate, seduce, and feed. That's why self-questioning in dreams is vital. Who am I here? Did I choose this, or am I just reacting? Is this presence really my creation? These questions act as keys to spiritual lucidity. Because it's not enough to know you're dreaming. You need to know who you're dreaming with. And more importantly, what are you giving away, unknowingly, in exchange for fleeting pleasure? Modern succubi, pornography, fetishism, and addictive algorithm succubi didn't disappear with time. They only changed form. Today, you don't need to be asleep to be seduced by forces that drain your energy. Just open a browser, scroll a feed, click a video. Within seconds, you're surrounded by images meticulously programmed to trigger your deepest instincts, not to free them, but to imprison them. Pornography, in its rawest form, is fertile ground for entities that vibrate on the frequency of distorted desire. It doesn't just stimulate pleasure, it conditions, fragments, programs. Every click releases dopamine. Every stimulus reinforces addiction, and every addiction weakens spiritual discernment. The modern succubus doesn't need to invade your dreams. It lives in the algorithms, which learn exactly what excites you, when, and how to keep you captive. Then come the fetishes, not as a healthy expression of sexuality, but as artificial constructions fed by repetition and sensory overload. Over time, pleasure stops being human. It becomes robotic, automatic, hollow. What's at stake isn't just the body, but your energetic field. How many people feel drained, anxious, empty, or disconnected after consuming erotic content? That's no coincidence. It's a symptom of a parasitic energetic connection. Not all entities need a physical form to act. Sometimes they use technology as a channel and data as bait. And the scariest part is that in this environment, the succubus no longer needs spells or words. It acts through repetition, constant exposure, uncontrolled dopamine. The mind loses focus, desire fragments, and the spirit weakens. But the real prison isn't pornography. It's the belief that you can't live without it. Liberation, through self-knowledge and desire control. The succubus only has power over those who do not know themselves. This is one of the most forgotten truths on the spiritual path. You don't fight the shadow with repression, but with awareness. And that starts with deeply recognizing what lives inside you. Desire itself is not the enemy. It is a vital force, a creative impulse that can build or destroy worlds. The problem arises when this energy is channeled into emptiness, neediness, or unconscious repetition. The first step to liberation is sincere self-observation. Understand what attracts you, why it does, and what inner void you're trying to fill. It's not about shame, it's about clarity. Because what's unconscious controls you, and what is illuminated can be transformed. Many who experience recurring succubus attacks, whether in dreams or through waking compulsions, are disconnected from their spiritual center. They are at the mercy of impulses, images, triggers. And freedom requires a reconnection with the sacred. This reconnection begins with simple but powerful practices. Meditation and conscious breathing to calm the mind. Non-judgmental self-observation to understand patterns, replacing empty stimuli with uplifting content. Cultivating sexual energy through practices like inner alchemy or spiritual tantra. But above all, the decision to exit autopilot and reclaim your will. Desire does not need repression. It needs redirection. When you channel your vital energy towards something greater, art, study, healing, spirituality, the parasites lose their food source. They cannot survive where the frequency rises. The succubus is not defeated by fighting. It dissolves in the light of conscious presence. And when you master your desire, nothing has power over you. Sacred sexuality, the opposite of the succubus. If the succubus represents the distortion of desire, soul fragmentation, and unconscious pleasure, then the most powerful antidote to its influence is sacred sexuality. But what does that truly mean? Sacred sexuality is not celibacy, repression, or moralism. It is a reconnection with the true purpose of sexual energy, creation, union, and transcendence. In many ancient traditions, like Tantra in India, Taoism in China, or the Egyptian mysteries, sexuality was seen as a bridge between the physical and spiritual worlds. When practiced with awareness, intention, and presence, sex was not just pleasurable. It was healing, expansive, sacred. In this context, desire ceases to be a raw impulse and becomes an alchemical fire, capable of burning away impurities, uniting inner polarities, and generating expanded states of consciousness. Unlike the succubus, which drains vital energy and leads to spiritual exhaustion, sacred sexuality recycles and multiplies it, elevating it to the heart, mind, and spirit. But to access this level of connection with yourself and others, we must undo centuries of conditioning. We live in a culture that reduces sex to performance, image, and consumption. The body has become a product, pleasure a drug, and the soul forgotten. To reclaim sacred sexuality is to restore wholeness, to step out of the cycle of seeking external validation and rediscover the inner temple, to see others and ourselves not as objects of desire, but as expressions of the divine. When sexuality is lived with presence, respect, and spiritual intention, no parasitic entity can come near. Because the vibration changes, the frequency rises, and desire, once seen as weakness, becomes a path of awakening. Sacred sexuality does not eliminate desire, it consecrates it. In the end, the succubus doesn't want your body, it wants your energy. The greatest illusion is believing these entities only want your body. The body is just the entry point. The true goal of the succubus and many other parasitic intelligences is your vital energy, the energy you emit when lost in unconscious pleasure, the frequency that leaks from you when you're vulnerable, confused, fragmented, the glow of your soul, slowly dimmed while you believe you're just enjoying life. Energy is power, and whoever controls your energy controls your life. That's why succubi don't appear with horns or red eyes. They disguise themselves as desire, fascination, fantasy. They make you crave deep down, empties you. And the more you give yourself without awareness, the more tired, lost, and unfocused you feel. As if something is draining you, because something is. Not with chains or threats, with seduction, with the promise of instant pleasure. In the subtle realms, these entities don't feed on flesh. They feed on frequency, emotional vibration, psychic energy. And the more you vibrate in fear, guilt, obsession, or uncontrolled desire, the more food they have. So the real battle is not outside, it's inside. You don't need swords or exorcisms. You need presence, discernment, and energetic sovereignty. When you understand that your body is a temple, your mind is an antenna, and your soul is sacred, no one can feed on you anymore. Because you've stopped being prey and become a source. What we call the succubus can be seen as a symbol, an entity, or a reflection of our own shadows. But regardless of form, one truth remains. There are forces that live off what you don't control. Desire is not the enemy. It's the spirit's language, seeking expression. But when desire is corrupted, fragmented, or used against you, it becomes the strongest chain, because it's the only one you accept with pleasure. In the legend of the succubus, the scariest thing isn't the creature, it's the mirror she holds. Because in it, you see yourself, your impulses, your voids, your unhealed wounds. The succubus draws near when you're disconnected. She whispers when you're needy. She wins when you forget who you are. But what if the curse you fear is actually a calling? An invitation to look inward, to reclaim your inner temple, to transform desire into devotion, pleasure into presence, energy into awareness. Because in the end, the succubus doesn't want to possess you. She wants you to never possess yourself, never know yourself, never awaken. But if you dare to open your eyes, if you dare to cross the mirror, you'll discover it wasn't the succubus chasing you. It was your soul trying to wake you up. Thank you for watching.